Zelensky will intercept Witkoff on his way to Moscow to have a face-to-face conversation, and Macron will ask Xi Jinping to scare Russia. Zelensky will intercept Witkoff on his way to Moscow to have a face-to-face conversation, and Macron will ask Xi Jinping to scare Russia. Meanwhile, the president of Poland has called not to make any deals with the Russians. New fantasies of Putin. The bunker dweller has been told about the complete capture of Pokrovsk and Vovchansk. Next in his rosy dreams are Sumy and Kharkiv regions. The occupiers have started attaching missiles to Shaheds to shoot down aircraft. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Armed Forces struck a number of targets overnight. Oil refineries hit, a drone launch base in Crimea destroyed. In South Africa, a radio host recruited citizens to fight Ukraine. Valerii Zaluzhnyi returned to Ukraine. More in today's episode. Start this Tuesday together. Volodymyr Zelensky meets Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff in Ireland about... At least, that's what the French agency AFP and other media outlets have reported. According to them, Witkoff allegedly plans to make a stop there on his way to Moscow for talks with Putin. However, Ukrainian sources refute this information. According to Radio NV, the French media have spread a fake, and neither Zelensky nor Witkoff will meet for now. Instead, a meeting between the American envoy and the Ukrainian delegation is possible on the way back from Moscow. Talks are scheduled with President Catherine Connolly and Prime Minister Michael Martin. Among the key topics are strengthening support for Ukraine and economic issues. Good afternoon. Yesterday, in a significant diplomatic development, high-ranking officials Witkoff and Merov convened another crucial meeting in the United States, specifically to engage in extensive and detailed discussions regarding the intricacies and potential implications of former President Trump's proposed peace plan. This particular plan, which has garnered considerable international attention, was thoroughly examined from various perspectives. Meanwhile, within the political circles and diplomatic corridors of Washington, there is a palpable and cautiously optimistic sentiment emerging, suggesting a hopeful outlook for future developments and potential resolutions. White House spokesperson Amy Leavitt stated the U.S. President's administration is very optimistic about an agreement in Florida. Yesterday, Witkoff and Umerov met in the U.S. to discuss Trump's peace plan, leading to cautious optimism in Washington. Leavitt added that Trump's team is investing significant efforts toward peace. There has been progress in discussing the terms. However, ABC News, citing sources within the delegations, paints a less optimistic picture. According to the results of the meetings, there was no breakthrough regarding territorial concessions. Moscow rejects the idea of a ceasefire on the front without security guarantees, while Kyiv is not ready for compromises that would mean a loss of sovereignty. No agreements with the Russians. Polish President Karol Nawrocki, in a speech marking the 195th today, marks a significant historical milestone. The solemn anniversary of the commencement of the momentous November uprising, a pivotal and deeply impactful event that unfolded between the years of 1830 and 1831. This particular uprising, a crucial period in history, began on this very day, initiating a series of events that would profoundly shape the future. It was a time of great upheaval and national struggle, a testament to the enduring spirit of the people involved during those challenging years.
There's only lies there.
A desire to break the spirit and a desire to destroy. This is a lesson that all of us, dear colleagues, must learn. After hosting Zelensky in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron is heading to Beijing. He will begin a 3-day state visit to China on December 3rd. There he plans to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping and ask him to use his influence on Russia to achieve a ceasefire in Ukraine. According to the French Foreign Ministry, Paris is counting on Beijing as a permanent member of the UN Security Council to help change the Kremlin's position. By the way, at a briefing with Zelensky, Macron commented on the corruption scandals in Ukraine, emphasizing that Paris has no right to lecture Kyiv, since the country has established independent anti-corruption bodies that are doing their job. At the same time, he sharply criticized Russia, where, in his words, there are no independent bodies to fight corruption and there is no independent judiciary. Although there are no official comments regarding the agreements in Florida, it is rumored that behind closed doors, the participants discussed to fight corruption. The US pressures Kyiv to cede territory to Russia. No official comments on Florida agreements, but rumors suggest Ukraine election timing discussed privately. Miami plan points reviewed in Moscow today. Outcome, the final.
Peace plan has not been agreed upon, but Trump still claims there are good chances for resolving the war. A meeting between the Ukrainian and US delegations took place in the United States. The negotiations lasted about 5 hours. In the end, both sides called them successful and constructive.
They are ongoing and they are going well. We want to stop the killing of people. This does not directly concern us, but I would like to save as many people as possible. A lot of people are dying. Last month, 27,000 people were killed in this senseless war. This should never have happened. At the same time, as
before, the two main issues remain security guarantees for post-war Ukraine and the territorial concessions that Kyiv is being pressured to make. Clearly, neither of these issues has been resolved. On those
disputed issues that were being negotiated, there has been no progress. I can tell you that on the issue of withdrawing Ukrainian troops from Donbass and on the issue of the status of the occupied, annexed Ukrainian territories, there are simply no solutions, not even in theory. What the US is proposing at the moment, Ukraine cannot agree to. I don't see any compromise here. That's why the American side will take to Russia a text that is about 80 to 85% complete.
At the same time, analysts note that this time the United States has indeed started to listen more closely. US Secretary Rubio stated work remains, despite Florida progress. Analysts note US now listens more to Ukraine, no longer demanding war's end.
on any terms. It is also about ensuring that the war ends in such a way that Ukraine remains sovereign and independent and has the opportunity for true prosperity. So it's not just about ending the war, it's about ending the war in a way that creates a mechanism and a path forward that will allow Ukraine to be independent and sovereign, never experience war again, and achieve tremendous prosperity.
For its people, Kyiv also notes that the communication between the US and Ukrainian delegations has become more constructive. The head of the Ukrainian negotiating team, Rustem Umerov, also called the meeting successful and substantive and noted that further consultations and work on agreeing on a general framework solution lie ahead.
We are grateful to the United States and their team for helping us. The United States hears us, the United States supports us. Ukrainian negotiator Rustem Umerov called the meeting successful, noting future consultations. He thanked the US for assistance.
Hears us, the United States supports us, the United States stands by our side, and we are grateful for everything that has been done so far. At the same time, the next stage of negotiations will be a visit to Moscow by Steve Witkoff, who is to deliver to Putin the agreed upon points and hear his reaction. According to experts, after the sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft, the Kremlin will be afraid to respond with a direct refusal. Analysts consider the most likely scenario to be Putin's proposal for direct talks with Trump, which never took place in Budapest. And here much depends on the American leader, since Washington has already stated that such a meeting is only possible after Moscow adopts the Medley Agreement. If
Trump makes significant concessions, if a meeting potentially takes place without Russia committing to a comprehensive peace plan, then Putin will issue a new and demanding ultimatum. That's a dead end. That's what practice shows. When the Americans meet with Putin, when they start making concessions, in turn it is imperative that another diplomatic envoy should promptly go to the capital city of Kyiv without delay.
To resolve the issue, U.S. Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll, he will apparently try to persuade Volodymyr Zelensky to make new concessions. And for Ukraine, in this situation, it's also very important to demonstrate readiness for dialogue.
Confidently, Trump will continue his tactic of applying pressure alternately, sometimes on official Kyiv. I'm sure Trump will continue his tactic of alternating pressure, sometimes on official Kyiv, sometimes on the Kremlin. So the main thing here is to catch the right moment in time and strengthen it while maintaining balance. So, of course, it's profoundly important here to recognize the critical nature of these discussions. At the very same time, in a concerted and strategic effort to meticulously coordinate the positions and future strategies of both Ukraine and its European allies, President Zelensky himself undertook a significant diplomatic journey, flying out the day before to engage in these crucial high-level talks.
Paris, for an important meeting with the esteemed President of France, Emmanuel Macron, to discuss crucial matters. So this week will clearly show how willing all sides are to make concessions and whether it is worth expecting success in the negotiations in the near future.
French President Emmanuel Macron this week will reveal willingness to concede and negotiation success prospects. Before American envoy Steve Witkoff's Moscow visit, Russian propaganda reported front successes to Putin, alleged capture of Pokrovsk, Donetsk and Vovchansk, Kharkiv. The Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council called this a massive lie aimed at the domestic audience and the negotiations. The head of the center, Andriy Kovlenko, writes that ahead of Witkoff's visit, Putin is trying to show that Russia can continue fighting next year as well. But he is also demonstrating this That's why they stage this, it's a cognitive show. And after these Kremlin fantasies about Pokrovsk, Putin gave the order to the Russian military command to create a so-called security zone along the border with Ukraine in the area of responsibility against Ukraine. They staged this cognitive show. After these fantasies, Putin ordered the Russian military to create a security zone in the northern military group's area. This signals intentions to expand control over Kharkiv, Sumy and Chernihiv regions. Last night, Ukrainian drones struck. It all started with loud explosions in Tuapse, a key Black Sea port of the Russian Federation, where the Rosneft oil terminal and refinery are located. Local residents reported that 2 tankers from Russia's Shadow Fleet were on fire. Drones also struck the Ilsky oil refinery near the Kremlin. Hit an oil storage depot, a large facilities.
In Livni, which supplies fuel to the front, a fire broke out. This is already the 3rd attack on it since autumn. Attacks have also been recorded in Chechnya, specifically at the location of the 141st Separate Special Motorized Rifle Regiment Akhmat in Gudermez. Preliminary reports say a drone hit the roof of the barracks. As a result, there was a fire and the structure collapsed. There are wounded. Due to the attack in the Moscow region, dozens of houses were left without electricity, living. In this village, people complain about elevators stopping, lack of heating, and being unable to cook food. Special Operations Forces units struck a warehouse and launch positions of Iranian Shaheds. They attacked near Cape Chauda in temporarily occupied Crimea. The occupiers regularly launch drones at Ukraine from there. However, now the hangars are on fire. After dozens of explosions, the launchers have been destroyed. For the first time, the Russians launched missiles directly from Shaheds. They armed the Iranian forces. For the first time, the Russians launched missiles directly from Shaheds. They armed the Iranian drone with a Soviet R-60 air-to-air missile. This combination is intended to destroy helicopters and tactical aviation aircraft that hunt drones. Ukrainian military analysts published photos of the wreckage of the downed drone with the attached missile. And this Shahed with the missile was shot down over central Ukraine during a nighttime attack.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Russian propaganda is keeping quiet about the failure of yet another of Putin's so-called wonder weapons. It would have been nothing except that the missile exploded in front of hundreds of onlookers who were watching. Russian propaganda is keeping quiet about the failure of yet another of Putin's so-called wonder weapons. It would have been nothing except that the missile exploded in front of hundreds of Gawkers who were watching its launch and its almost instantaneous self-destruction. The only thing the munition left behind was a purple cloud, which, according to official statements, poses no danger. But things are not as clear-cut as Russians like to say. We'll tell you next what the Kremlin's mouthpieces are keeping silent about. A truly unique and unparalleled missile system, possessing absolutely no analogues anywhere else in the entire world, is already practically on the verge of being fully in service with the formidable Russian army. It was back in June of the year 2023 that President Putin himself was making such bold and confident statements. Now, however, it is already the month of December in the year 2025, and yet another supposed weapon with no analogues whatsoever is still not actively on duty, nor has it been deployed. There is absolutely nothing quite like it in the entire world, or so they claim. And judging by the very latest failed tests conducted at the Yasny Cosmodrome, which is located in the Orenburg region, the formidable intercontinental ballistic missile, known as Sarmat, is still a considerable distance away from being officially put on active duty. This particular incident marks already the second unsuccessful attempt to thoroughly test the Sarmat missile system. The initial first attempt took place earlier in the year 2024. During that unfortunate event, the missile tragically exploded within its silo during a critically failed launch of the powerful Sarmat missile. This time, the failed launch was the most recent one, at the Plesetsk Cosmodrome in the Arkhangelsk region. This time, the failed launch, which happened on the last weekend of November, was recorded on video by locals. After the explosion, a huge cloud of poisonous orange-purple color rose into the air. The Russian authorities did not provide any official comment, and local media wrote that there would be no evacuation from Yasny, claiming that the smoke cloud posed no threat to people and that everything was fine. The color of the cloud after the explosion is characteristic of something highly toxic. Such a color is characteristic only of rockets that use rather toxic fuel, namely a pair of nitrogen tetroxide and unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine, which are better known as amyl and heptyl. It is precisely amyl and heptyl that are used as fuel in a whole range of Soviet and now Russian rockets. A cosmodrome, of course, is primarily a rocket launch base. It is one of 11 sites in Russia from which it is possible to launch rockets with nuclear warheads. And with high probability, these were yet another series of unsuccessful tests of the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile. The missile is supposedly in serial production, supposedly adopted into service since 2022. But with so many failed launches, it's very difficult to talk about its actual presence in the arsenal and its real combat readiness, at least by even the most minimal high standards. Both the shape of the missile and, most importantly, the location from which this is being operated. If the crucial information about the launch is definitively confirmed 100%, then this particular event was indeed the third or possibly even the fourth Sarmat launch attempt, of which only a single one was at least partially successful in its objectives. Most likely, these specific launches were strategically carried out towards the very end of the year so that President Putin could effectively threaten the world with yet another formidable wonder weapon during his highly anticipated annual address to the Federal Assembly. But as we can clearly see from the unfolding events, this strategy has not entirely played out as intended, and the outcome have been less than conclusive, leaving many questions unanswered and the overall situation quite ambiguous. This was yet another childish morning performance. Like in kindergarten, everything is scripted. Who says what? But there was no reason for it because the missile exploded. Andriy Rezhenko, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Ukrainian Navy from 2004 to 2020. 80% of the tests, especially the first ones, were successful, but after that, not anymore. No one can seriously consider this missile a finished product. Along with the failed launch of the Sarmat nuclear missile over the weekend, another emergency occurred at the Baikonur Cosmodrome during the launch of the Soyuz MS-28. As a result, after a post-flight inspection, it was determined that the rocket engine's gas jet from the first stage tore out part of launch complex number 6 of the space rocket.
Complex number 31, one of the service cabins. The cosmonauts were not injured, however. The launch complex requires repairs after the transfer of the Gagarin launch pad.
Number 1 was transferred to the Kazakhstan Museum of Cosmonautics, so site number 31 remains the only one from which crewed launches can be carried out. There is no longer a replacement or backup site for crewed Soyuz flights, only cargo sites remain. Now, the only Roscosmos launch pad from which crewed launches could be performed is left without a functioning service cabin. The rocket and space. In the Republic of South Africa, a journalist is on trial.
On suspicion of recruiting militants for Russia. The case concerns SAFM state radio host Nonkululeko Mantulu. She is accused of recruiting local residents to participate in the war against Ukraine. Several men were detained along with her. 3 were stopped while trying to fly to Russia via the United Arab Emirates. Another, according to the investigation, has already arrived in the Russian Federation. According to the law, participation in the armed forces of another country without government permission is illegal. All suspects will remain in custody until the bail hearing next week. Recep Erdoğan has condemned the attacks on Russia's shadow fleet. The president of Turkey stated that attacks on Russian tankers in the Black Sea are unacceptable, especially in the Turkish exclusive economic zone. He said he cannot in any way justify these attacks, which threaten the safety of navigation, human lives, and the environment. The Turkish head of state considers such attacks on commercial vessels to be a worrying escalation of the situation. Russian aircraft are killing machines. After reports from various sources indicate a concerning and escalating trend. Russian aircraft are experiencing mechanical failures and operational malfunctions with increasing frequency. This growing number of breakdowns is becoming a significant issue, impacting both their military and civilian fleets. The situation suggests a deterioration in the overall airworthiness and reliability of these aircraft, raising serious questions about maintenance standards and the availability of essential components.
And with an ever-growing and increasingly alarming frequency, critical and often catastrophic problems frequently arise while the aircraft is still soaring high above the ground, often far from any immediate assistance or safe landing, which can tragically and inevitably lead to an absolutely immense, widespread, and devastating tragedy, impacting countless lives and causing profound, lasting sorrow across communities.
This concerns stolen foreign aircraft, which Russians cannot repair due to sanctions, and domestic pride, the Aeroflot plane operating the Irkutsk-Moscow flight, forced to make an emergency landing at Perm Airport, Bolshoy Savino, as reported by the airline's press service. The incident involved flight Su-1563 with 158 passengers. According to the carrier, the commander decided to make an unscheduled landing due to increased fuel consumption.
Which could indicate a possible leak. And here comes another blow. Airbus has urgently recalled 6,000 A320 aircraft. All this is to roll back a failed software update. These planes are also present in Russia, but they are stolen, so no one is calling them in for repairs. However, Rosaviatsia boasted that this was not hidden from them at all, because they already have very old and outdated software. It hasn't been updated at all since the year 2022. So roughly speaking, we are essentially dealing with Windows 7, while the significant problems actually occurred for users who were running Windows 10. There's really absolutely nothing to brag about here or to be proud of. If the company can manage to fix a software glitch or a technical issue in just a couple of hours, then truly nothing can help the stolen Russian aircraft anymore. Unless, of course, the international sanctions are suddenly and miraculously lifted by some unforeseen event. The number
of flying operational aircraft is constantly decreasing. This year, I remember about 30 Airbuses were taken out of service. But there, just 2 or perhaps 3. That's a truly significant thing to consider. They are indeed being operated quite intensively with a considerable amount of effort and resources. And that, precisely, is where the real and substantial problems inevitably start to emerge. Why, one might reasonably ask, wouldn't they? It is genuinely challenging to state with absolute precision and certainty exactly how many operational aircraft the Russian civil aviation fleet currently possesses, especially considering the various factors impacting its overall inventory and availability at this moment.
However, it is important to clarify that we are certainly not discussing or referring to a period spanning multiple decades in this context. The time frame in question is considerably shorter, and we are not contemplating such an extensive duration.
Absolutely not. By no stretch of the imagination could that ever be considered true. It is entirely out of the question, not even remotely possible, and certainly not by a long shot. They won't make it in time with their own planes. This year, they only produced, they promised 1,000 planes by 2023. The Russians insist that by then, their import substitution will be fully operational. And
foreign vessels simply will not be needed at all. To be fair, Russia still steadfastly maintains and continues to assert they do actually have some domestic aircraft. The Sukhoi Superjet, which constantly breaks down and is made almost entirely of foreign components, and also the MC-21. The latter is considered the key project of Russian civil aviation. In fact, just a few days ago, they boasted that the MC-21 had begun flight certification tests. But the start of this series, the serial production of the MC-21 was originally planned for 2017. It's hard to say how long the test will take. Meanwhile, Russian civil aviation is melting before our eyes.
Valerie, it's good to see you. I hope you're doing well.
Meadow, it is difficult to say how long the test will take. Meanwhile, the Russian civil aviation is now in Ferrari. Valerii Zaluzhnyi seems to have returned to Ukraine. However, it is unknown that it is visible months to their homeland or the final return from London. On his social media, he posted a photo with his wife and left a caption under the picture. Days, months to their homeland or the final return from London. On his social media, he posted a photo with his wife and left a caption under the picture saying that there's no place like home. That's all I have time to share for now. Please like this video, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the most interesting news. See you next time.